So one afternoon, they put on some dirty old clothes that they didn't mind ruining, and they made their way over to the hospital. They parked their bikes, they snuck through the fence, they made their way up to the shed, they climbed up into the second floor, they walked down the second floor hallway down to the flight of stairs, they went down to the first floor where the stairs stopped. From there, they walked over to an access door that led to another flight of stairs that just went down into the basement. And so they open that door up, they step inside, and they get their flashlights out because it's pitch black inside of the stairwell, and they shine their lights down the steps. And it was a half flight of stairs that led to a dry landing, and then there was another flight of stairs from the landing going down to the basement floor, and the final steps of that second set of stairs were completely submerged. So with their flashlights up, they walk down the first flight of stairs to the landing, they turn around and they stop and they shine their light into the basement. And what they see is just deep, dark, murky, standing water. And from their perspective, the basement was not some huge, sprawling, open space like you would imagine. Instead, they were looking down at a wall because there was this hallway that ran perpendicular to the stairs. And so it went all the way to the right and all the way to the left, but they couldn't see down either of them. They could only see basically the landing of the stairs. In order to look down the hall, they would need to go into the water and walk a few feet into the hall. And so as the boys are just scanning their flashlights into this murky water inside of this small segment of the basement that they could see, Paul finally says, "All right, you know what? Screw it, I'm going." And he slowly walks down that final flight of stairs and he takes his first step into the water. And Tim and Max, they stay up on the landing. They're gonna let Paul go on his own first. Paul takes another step, and before long, he says he's reached the basement floor and he's up to his chest in this disgusting water. And so he's keeping his arms high up out of the water, he's still got his flashlight, and he wades out to the point where he can actually look down the hallway in either direction. And so he looks down one way, and then he looks down the other way, and then he turns around to face Tim and Max, who are still back up on the landing, and he says, "You can't see down either hallway. There's huge filing cabinets, and there's a generator down there, and I can't see in either direction. We probably can't go very far." At this point, Tim and Max feel compelled to go down there with their friend, and so they walk down that final flight of stairs into the water, and they wade their way over next to Paul, at which point they shine their lights down the hall, and sure enough, they basically can't see anything past maybe 5 or 6 meters down each hallway. As the boys were standing in the middle of the hallway, not making any moves in either direction, they suddenly hear something down the far right side of the hallway. And they shine their lights and they realize their view is completely obstructed, and whatever's made this sound, they can't see it. It's blocked by the generator and the filing cabinet. And as they're shining their lights, they still can't see anything. They hear a massive splash, like someone cannonballed at the far end of the hallway. And the boys do not stick around to try to get a better angle to see it. They immediately turn around and run as fast as they can, or as fast as the water will allow them, back to the steps, back to the landing, back to the first floor, back to the second floor, down the hall, out the window, and they run all the way back to their bikes. And by the time they're back there, they're panting, they're soaking wet, they haven't spoken yet. It was like intuitive fight or flight, and they were out of there, and they're sitting there heaving, and they look at each other and they start laughing. It was like this adrenaline rush. It was crazy what they were doing. And they look back up at the hospital and they're staring at the second floor window, almost half expecting to see whoever it was that made this big splashing sound to suddenly emerge in the window, but no one ever did. And after about an hour of just staring at the hospital and seeing no activity whatsoever, they convinced themselves that whatever they heard down in the hallway was probably just something falling off a shelf, or maybe there's a bird down there, but whatever it was harmless. Eventually, Paul says to Tim and Max that they should totally go back in there and try to figure out what it was that made that sound. And initially, Tim and Max are like, I don't really want to do that. But eventually, after Paul called them babies enough times, they said, okay, fine, we'll go back in the hospital. And so they go back through the fence, they walk up the parking lot, they climb onto the second floor, they walk down the hall, they go down the stairs, they get to that access door that leads down into the basement, and before they just fling it open, Paul gets his flashlight up, he turns the handle and he opens the door just a little bit and looks inside to see if anybody's in there. And there isn't, so he opens the door the rest of the way, and he, Tim, and Max go inside. Once they're inside, they shine their light down to the landing and they can still see their wet footprints all over the steps. It's silence inside of the basement. They make their way down to the landing, they turn around, they shine the light into the water in the basement itself, and now the water is completely calm again. There's no motion, it's still completely quiet. And as they're standing there looking, it's clear all of them are hesitating. They don't want to go back into chest-deep, murky, stagnant water, and they also don't know what it was that made that sound. While they were outside, they're really confident it wasn't a big deal, but now that they're in this dark basement, it seemed a little bit more intimidating. And so Tim suggests they throw something into the water to try to get a reaction from whatever this thing is, if it's alive. but they didn't have anything to throw. And then Paul, out of nowhere, takes his flashlight and throws it into the water. And before Tim or Max could react to what he just did, they all just stopped and listened to see if that would cause a reaction from whatever it was down there. And as the flashlight sunk to the bottom and completely out of view because the water was so murky, there was no reaction down there. It was still completely silent. Paul turns to Tim and Max and says, the reason I threw it is now we have to go in because I have to get my flashlight. So Paul, along with Tim and Max, make their way down that final flight of stairs. They start walking into the water. They get all the way up to their chest in water, and they wade out until Paul is directly over the light. He can barely see it through the murky water, but he can clearly see it below him. And since he doesn't want to go under the water, he tried to use his feet to get the light up, but he couldn't do it. And so he looks at Tim and Max and he goes, I'm going under. He takes a deep breath and he goes under the water. He immediately hears the muffled scream